We strongly urge the U.S. to correct its mistake and withdraw the sanctions. Otherwise, the U.S. will face the consequences.
China has expressed outrage toward the United States for imposing sanctions on the Chinese military. Washington says it took the measures because China's military bought weapons from Russia, a move that breaches another U.S. sanctions law punishing Moscow for meddling in the 2016 U.S. election.
Moscow and Beijing warned the Trump administration it was playing with fire after the U.S. imposed a new round of sanctions on China and Russia, deepening mistrust of Washington in both capitals.
We strongly urge the U.S. to correct its mistake and withdraw the sanctions. Otherwise, the U.S. will face the consequences.
Ties between Russia and China have vastly expanded to include energy deals, cross-border investments and defense cooperation, and have picked up speed this year amid attacks on both countries by President Donald Trump.
The U.S. State Department announced the sanctions on Thursday. They target the Chinese military's Equipment Development Department and its director. The director and other officials are alleged to have been involved in deals to acquire Russia's latest S-400 ground-to-air missile system and Sukhoi 35 fighter planes. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov was also critical of Washington, saying more U.S. sanctions come as no surprise to Moscow. Russia hopes to make the S-400 missile system its main export weapon. It's also planning to deliver the system to Turkey next year.
During a recent meeting with his Finnish counterpart, Putin called U.S. sanctions counterproductive and senseless.
We hope that our American partners will eventually realize the uselessness of this kind of politics, and we will start constructive cooperation.
But many U.S. and European politicians disagree.
Sanctions sometimes, and most certainly in this case, are the right moral punishment to take in response to egregious illegal activity, even if they don't change Putin's behavior.
Washington on Thursday imposed sanctions on a branch of China's military apparatus for buying fighter jets and surface-to-air missiles from Russia, which it said was in violation of measures imposed on Moscow to punish it for alleged interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. It also added 33 Russians to a list of people barred from making significant military transactions. Sergei Ryabkov, Russia's Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, said sanctions are futile and have turned into a kind of national entertainment for the U.S., noting that Thursday's announcement marked the 60th anti-Russian measure since 2011. No one will ever succeed in dictating their own terms to Russia. Operators of the Washington sanctions machine are advised to at least superficially familiarize themselves with our history in order to stop wasting their time, Mr. Ryabkov said in a statement. Playing with fire is stupid, because it can become dangerous. In Beijing, a spokesman for China's foreign ministry demanded the removal of the sanctions or bear the consequences. The sanction announcement came days after Russia and China carried out the largest joint war games in East Siberia, which the West see it as a provocation.
1,000 tanks and some 300,000 Russian troops, a third of the country's military personnel, are on maneuvers in the vast expanses of eastern Siberia. The skies above are patrolled by 1,000 aircraft. In the Arctic and Pacific Oceans, 80 Russian warships are conducting mock battles and landing drills. For the first time, China is taking part with around 3,000 troops. Mongolia has also sent a contingent. In the front row seat Thursday, the Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I would like to say a special thank you to the armed forces of the People's Republic of China and Mongolia. Our fraternity in arms has long and firm traditions.
This is a remote corner of the world, but the exercises have global resonance.
As well as demonstrating to the West that it has this alliance with China, it's also an opportunity for Russia to show what it's learned from its military interventions, for example in Syria, for example in eastern Ukraine, and how it's putting that to use in its military upgrades at the moment.
Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted the United States and its allies to impose sanctions on Moscow.
The Western sanctions, which have been in place since 2014 on the Russian economy, have damaged Russia's ability to get, for example, military components that it used to get from its Western partners. And so Russia's military, in the meantime, is undergoing a 10-year-long renovation and upgrade. And so to pay for those parts, Russia is going to need to find alternative partners.
The exercises coincide with the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, with China engaged in a spiraling trade war with the United States. Analysts say Moscow spies an opportunity to deepen relations with Beijing.
They're politically becoming very close. Economically, the Russian-Chinese trade is booming, when other kind of trade, especially in Russia, is not booming at all. And also, of course, now militarily they're acting together as brothers in arms in military games that are basically aimed at the United States and its allies.
The slogans for the joint exercises read "Friendship for the sake of peace," but there are also sources of tension.
Particularly the Belt and Road initiative of China's that sort of bypasses Russia, especially because China is quite interested in countries like Ukraine and Belarus and using its infrastructure as a gateway to Europe. I think Russia is quite suspicious of what China is planning.
US Defense Secretary Jim Mattis told reporters Tuesday that he sees little in the long term that aligns Russia and China. The military exercises come amid threats from Washington of more sanctions against Russia.
The US and allies also kicked off one of the largest war games in the Pacific, involving 1,000 troops and hundreds of warplanes, submarines and ships.